In ancient Rome, one of the trendiest ways to freshen your breath and whiten your teeth was to rinse your mouth with urine, not by accident, on purpose. People bought it, bottled it, and swished it around, and the truly upsetting part is that it worked. The ammonia in it genuinely disinfects and bleaches. So while you're wincing, understand this. That Roman gargling pea was not a fool. He was a person fighting the exact same enemy you fought this morning with a mint, an enemy humans have been at war with for thousands of years, using everything from twigs to incense to, yes, bodily fluids. So, how did ancient humans with no toothpaste and no dentists actually deal with bad breath? The answer runs through nearly every civilization on Earth. And it ends with a twist about your own mouth that you won't love. Here's what makes this more than a gross out list of old remedies. To fight bad breath, you first have to understand what it actually is, and ancient people were fighting it blind, without a single clue about the real cause. Bad breath isn't dirt. It isn't the food itself, not really. It's a living thing, or rather, billions of them. Your mouth is one of the most crowded ecosystems on your body, a warm, wet, dark environment home to hundreds of species of bacteria. Most are harmless, but a specific crowd of them, living mostly on the back of your tongue and down in your gums, feed on the leftover proteins from your food and the dead cells in your mouth. And when they digest that material, they release waste gases. Those gases are built on sulfur, the same element that makes rotten eggs and uh, other unpleasant smells so memorable. That's the true source of the reek. Not the onion you ate, the bacteria breaking down the onion and everything else, and breathing out sulfur while they do it. Which means bad breath is not a hygiene failure in the way we imagine. It's biology. It's a colony of organisms living in your mouth and exhaling, and it never fully stops. It's why you wake up with morning breath even if you brushed the night before. Overnight, your saliva slows, the mouth dries, and the sulfur crowd throws a party. Now sit with the scale of the problem for people 10,000 years ago. No brushing as we know it, no mouthwash off a shelf, no idea that bacteria even existed. That discovery was thousands of years away. For most of history, humans genuinely believed bad breath and rotting teeth were caused by a tiny worm burrowing into the mouth. They were fighting an invisible, misunderstood enemy with nothing but trial, error, and whatever grew nearby. And yet, this is the part that should keep you watching. They didn't just give up and accept living in a cloud of their own stench. Across the entire ancient world, on every inhabited continent, completely separate cultures who had never met each other independently declared war on bad breath. They invented tools, recipes, rituals, and daily routines to fight it. Some of what they came up with was strange, some of it was disgusting, and a shocking amount of it actually worked, so well that you are still using versions of it today without realizing it. So the real question isn't just, did ancient people have bad breath? It's how a species with no understanding of germs managed to build, over and over, a working toolkit against them. To see how, we have to start with the evidence hiding in their teeth, literally fossilized onto them. To know how ancient humans fought bad breath, you first have to know how bad the problem actually was. And it turns out our ancestors left behind a perfect record of it, cemented right onto their skeletons. It's called dental calculus. In life, we call it tartar, that hardened plaque your dentist scrapes off. In the mouth, plaque is a soft film of bacteria. But if it isn't removed, minerals in your saliva turn it to stone, fossilizing a thin crust of your oral bacteria onto the tooth. And here's the gift to science. That crust can survive for tens of thousands of years. When archaeologists find ancient teeth, they're often coated in a hardened graveyard of the exact bacteria that lived in that person's mouth, plus microscopic scraps of the food they ate, trapped in the layers. In 2013, a team of researchers led by scientists including Alan Cooper and Christina Warrener did something remarkable. They took this ancient tartar from skeletons spanning thousands of years and sequenced the DNA locked inside it, reconstructing the bacterial world of mouths long dead. They built a timeline of the human mouth, and that timeline told a genuinely unsettling story. Because the human mouth was not always the sulfur factory it is today. For hunter-gatherers, humans before farming, the oral ecosystem was more diverse and more balanced. Lots of different species, kept in a kind of equilibrium, with fewer of the aggressive, acid-producing, gum-destroying bacteria we associate with disease and stink today. Their mouths weren't sterile, but they were, in a real sense, healthier than ours. Then came farming, roughly 10,000 years ago. Humans started eating a lot of one new thing: carbohydrates, grains, bread, porridge, soft, starchy, sugary food. And the bacteria in the human mouth responded like an invasive species handed unlimited fuel. The balanced ecosystem tipped. The species that thrive on sugar and starch exploded, crowding out the others. Cavities became common, gum disease climbed, and the sulfur-producing crowd that drives bad breath had a permanent buffet. Then came a second hit, much more recently: the Industrial Revolution, and with it, cheap refined sugar and white flour. The oral microbiome took another nosedive, losing even more of its diversity, tilting even further toward the disease-causing, smell-producing species. The mouth you have right now, statistically, is less biologically balanced than the mouth of a person who lived 20,000 years ago. Let that reframe the whole topic. We tend to assume ancient people, being primitive, must have had catastrophic breath and rotting teeth, while we, with our science, have clean, fresh mouths. The evidence says it's closer to the opposite. In many ways, we created the modern bad breath problem with our diet, and then spent a fortune trying to mask the thing we caused. So when did the fighting back begin? Astonishingly early. The oldest weapons in this war predate almost everything else we think of as civilization, and the very first one was little more than a stick. The chew stick is arguably humanity's oldest dental tool, and it's beautifully simple. You take a fresh twig from the right kind of tree, chew one end until it frays into soft bristles, and scrub your teeth and gums with it. That's it. Evidence for chew sticks goes back over 7,000 years to ancient Mesopotamia. The Babylonians were using them before the pyramids existed. But the genius wasn't just the scrubbing. It was which tree. The most famous chew stick, the miswak, comes from a plant called Salvadora persica, the toothbrush tree. And it's not a random choice. The wood is naturally loaded with antibacterial compounds, along with fluoride-like minerals and substances that fight plaque and freshen breath. People 7,000 years ago, with zero knowledge of chemistry, had somehow identified a twig that functions as a toothbrush and toothpaste in one. The miswak worked so well that it never went away. It's still used daily by millions of people across the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. And modern studies have repeatedly confirmed it genuinely reduces plaque and bacteria. A 7,000-year-old technology that still holds up in a lab. That's the bar our ancestors set on day one. Now, travel to ancient Egypt, where the war on bad breath became an art form. The Egyptians were fastidious about the body, and the mouth was no exception. They created some of the earliest known tooth powders, abrasive mixtures for scrubbing teeth clean, made from things like crushed eggshell, powdered ox hooves, ground pumice, and myrrh. You'd rub this grit onto your teeth to scour off buildup. Harsh, yes. Effective, also yes. But the Egyptians went further and invented something you'll recognize instantly: the breath mint. A recipe survives from ancient Egypt for small pellets made by boiling together frankincense, myrrh, and cinnamon with honey, then shaping the mixture into little balls. You'd pop one in your mouth and let it dissolve, releasing warm, spicy, aromatic compounds to cover the smell. Think about that. 4,000 years ago, someone was carrying around the equivalent of a tin of Altoids, made of incense and honey. The specific ingredients weren't random either. Frankincense and myrrh both have real antibacterial properties. This wasn't just perfume for the mouth, it was, accidentally, medicine. Keep moving to ancient Greece and Rome, where the approach got both more scientific and more disgusting. On the sophisticated end, the Greeks and Romans chewed mastic, a resin from the mastic tree of the island of Chios that hardens into a natural gum. Chewing it cleaned the teeth, stimulated saliva, and left a fresh, piney scent. It is quite literally the ancestor of chewing gum, and mastic is still harvested and chewed today. The Romans also had toothpicks, sometimes made of silver for the wealthy, and their own gritty tooth powders, dentifrices, made from crushed bones, oyster shells, and sometimes charcoal. And then, on the other end of the spectrum, there was the urine. As strange as it sounds, rinsing the mouth with urine was a real practice in parts of the Roman world, prized specifically for whitening teeth and cleaning the mouth. The Roman poet Catullus openly mocked a man named Ignatius for his gleaming smile, needling him that his bright teeth just advertised what he'd been rinsing with. But mockery aside, it worked. Aged urine is rich in ammonia, and ammonia is a powerful cleaning and bleaching agent. It's the active ingredient in plenty of modern cleaning products. The Romans had stumbled onto real chemistry through the least appealing door imaginable. Urine was so useful for cleaning, in fact, that it became a taxed commodity. The Emperor Vespasian famously put a tax on it, and when questioned about profiting from something so foul, reportedly held up a coin and said, "Money doesn't stink." Now go east to India, where oral care became something deeper. A daily spiritual and medical ritual codified in the Ayurvedic tradition thousands of years ago. The Ayurvedic morning routine reads almost like a modern dentist's dream list. You cleaned your teeth with a neem twig, neem being another naturally antibacterial wood. You scraped your tongue with a curved copper or silver scraper to physically remove the bacterial film. And remember, the back of the tongue is exactly where the sulfur-producing bacteria live, so tongue scraping directly attacks the source of bad breath. Tongue scrapers you can buy today are the same tool, unchanged. And then there was oil pulling, swishing a mouthful of sesame or coconut oil around for several minutes to trap and pull out bacteria before spitting it out. Ancient Indians finished with breath-freshening spices, cardamom, clove, fennel. If you've ever eaten at an Indian restaurant and been offered a little bowl of colorful fennel seeds at the end of the meal, you've participated in a breath-freshening tradition thousands of years old. Travel further, to China, and you find the next great leap, the bristle toothbrush. Long before Europe had anything like it, Chinese inventors attached stiff hog bristles to handles of bamboo or bone, creating a brush recognizably like the one in your bathroom right now. The design was so effective that when it eventually reached Europe centuries later, it barely had to change. The Chinese also relied heavily on tea, which, as it happens, contains compounds that suppress the growth of odor-causing bacteria. A culture that drank tea all day was, without knowing the mechanism, continually rinsing its mouth with a mild antibacterial. And weaving through the entire Islamic world was the miswak again, elevated from a tool to a point of religious devotion. Cleaning the mouth with the siwak was strongly encouraged as part of daily worship and cleanliness, recommended before prayers. An entire civilization built regular, ritual oral hygiene into the rhythm of the day, centuries before the modern West made brushing twice a day normal. Which brings us, finally and awkwardly, to medieval Europe, often the weakest link in this global story. Europeans of the Middle Ages did care about fresh breath, and they used herbs to get it, chewing sage, mint, parsley, cloves, and rinsing with herb and vinegar mixtures. Sage was even rubbed on the teeth to clean and whiten them, but Europe leaned harder on masking the smell than on the deep, systematic routines of the East, and its understanding stayed tangled up in that ancient myth, the toothworm, for far longer. Right up into the 1700s, European texts still blamed decay and foul breath on a worm gnawing away inside the tooth. While parts of the world were scraping tongues and brushing with antibacterial twigs, much of Europe was, in a sense, still hunting an imaginary worm. Step back from the twigs and the incense and the urine, and a much bigger pattern comes into focus. The first is just how right they were, so often, for the wrong reasons. Not one of these cultures knew that bacteria existed. Not one could have told you about volatile sulfur compounds, or anaerobic microbes, or the microbiome. They were operating in total scientific darkness. And yet look at what they landed on. Antibacterial woods, tongue scraping that targets the exact spot where the smell is produced, saliva-boosting gums, aromatic spices with real antimicrobial properties, ammonia as a disinfectant. Through nothing but thousands of years of patient trial and error, noticing that this twig helped and that berry didn't, Humanity reverse engineered a genuinely effective antibacterial toolkit without ever seeing the bacteria. They were fighting an enemy they couldn't see, name, or understand, and they were landing real blows. The second realization is stranger, and it loops back to that evidence in the teeth. Remember, the modern bad breath problem is, to a large degree, a problem we manufactured, with farming, and then with industrial sugar. The deeper irony is that the ancient world's war on bad breath tracks almost exactly with this. Hunter-gatherers with their balanced mouths left behind the fewest elaborate remedies. It was the great agricultural civilizations, the ones eating bread and grain and sweets, the ones whose mouths were tipping toward the sulfur crowd, who became obsessed with tooth powders, breath pellets, and cleaning rituals. In other words, the cultures that invented the disease also invented the cure. We baked the bread that fed the bacteria, then spent the next 10,000 years inventing ways to fight the smell. The war on bad breath is, in a very real sense, a war humans have been waging against our own diet. And the third thing is the most quietly amazing: how much of this ancient war you are still fighting today with their weapons. That toothbrush in your bathroom is a refined Chinese hog bristle brush. The tongue scraper in the pharmacy is an unchanged Ayurvedic tool. Your chewing gum is industrialized mastic resin. The mint you crunched this morning is the direct descendant of an Egyptian honey-and-incense pellet. The fennel seeds after your dinner, the parsley sitting on the edge of your plate, that parsley is not decoration. It is there because for centuries, people ate it to freshen their breath after a meal, and the garnish is a fossil of that habit, sitting on your plate right now, its original purpose forgotten. You are surrounded by the tools of a battle that started before the pyramids, and you use them every day without knowing whose hands shaped them first. So go back to that Roman, swishing his bottled urine, wincing slightly, chasing a bright smile and clean breath. It's easy to laugh at him, but he wasn't primitive and he wasn't stupid. He was doing exactly what you did this morning and what a Babylonian did with a frayed twig, and an Egyptian did with a honeyed pellet of incense, and an Indian did with a copper scraper and a mouthful of oil, and a Chinese scholar did with a bristle brush, and a medieval monk did with a sprig of sage. Every one of them woke up, tasted the same faint staleness we all wake up to, and decided, as humans always seem to decide, that they would not simply surrender to it. Because underneath the incense and the ammonia and the twigs, this was never really about breath. It was about wanting to be close to other people without shame, to lean in and speak, to laugh, to kiss, to sit shoulder to shoulder without carrying a private cloud of your own decay. The war on bad breath is, at its root, one of the oldest and most human wars of all. The quiet, daily effort to be a little more pleasant to be near. So the next time you pop a mint, or crunch a piece of gum, or push that sprig of parsley to the side of your plate, take a second to recognize it. You're holding a weapon thousands of years in the making. You're the newest soldier in the longest, strangest war humans have ever fought. And somewhere out there, a colony of sulfur bacteria on the back of your tongue is already regrouping for tonight.